Is the School District of Waukesha Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for March 2024. Can we please verify that the meeting's been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you. We can begin seeking approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the February 4th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brooks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. First item, actually next up is our opportunity for public comment. Did anyone sign up to speak tonight?
No.
Okay, thank you. And then our first item under general business is discussion with possible action on the update to Board Policy 5430 class rank. I see Mrs. Ryan is heading to the table. Welcome.
Good evening. So yes, Ms. Ryan is joining us tonight to talk about this policy. This policy is being brought forth from the recommendations of Neola. Some of the revisions are recommended and required for any districts who wish to participate in the Guaranteed Admission Program for the Wisconsin Academic Excellence Scholarship Program. Since this was up for revisions, Ms. Ryan and I looked at the overall policy itself. We took an opportunity to tighten up and maybe clarify some of the language, much like we have done with some of our other policies. So we were just going to kind of share and talk through some of the changes that we made overall based for the policy. Do you want to start?
Sure. Good evening. So I think when we took a look at what Neola was recommending as changes, we found a lot of redundancy in ours, and so we took a lot of the redundancy out and added in the part at the beginning of the University Wisconsin Guaranteed Admission Program. And then really with if you jump down to the third paragraph that's on here, is that the important point stated there that the board authorizes a system of class ranking by grade point average for students in grades 9 through 12, and that the state law requires that it's completed by grade 11 because of the Wisconsin Guaranteed Admission Program now. Looking at a neighboring district, they stop their policy right then and there. So we have a lot more, but it also didn't all necessarily flow correctly and make sense. So what we took out, what we added was that the superintendent shall develop a statement describing the procedures that, I don't know why procedures is not green there, to calculate the grade point average and the assignment of class rank to include the following. And it really just, the green parts are the one pieces that we need rather than all the red wordiness of how it calculates. The statement that is referred to is the administrative guidelines, and the administrative guideline 5430 actually describes how we weight the grades. So here's just a list of what's included: early graduation, weighted courses, audited courses, satisfactory, unsatisfactory grades, grades from any study abroad, alternative, or home schools, and grades from another country. The bottom there then, Neola recommended and how the 11th grade GPA shall be calculated and how it must be noted on the student's transcript if they are in the top 5 or 10% at the end of their junior year. And then valedictorian, salutatorian stayed the same. And we struck out the last part about the student handbook and selection guide simply because, yes, we do those things. Not necessarily sure it needs to be part of that policy.
Anybody want to start? I got some things. Okay. Thank you. Everything in green, if I understand correctly, was Neola recommendation to add?
Yes.
Okay.
Or from our
From our original. So like I think the third paragraph and the fourth little paragraph before the list of letters, those were what we already had.
Okay. Why would we call it a statement if we know in fact that it's an administrative guideline? Do we do that anyplace else?
Nope, the statement came from the old policy. It was written in the old policy that we must include a statement. We could certainly change that to the administrative guidelines.
We just say a guideline or guidance?
Would develop guidelines describing. or administrative guidelines.
And then I don't see that we reference that guideline at the bottom. Should we? Just AG 5430, wouldn't that be like inappropriate at the end?
You could put it at the end, or you could put it directly with where you reference the guideline. That seems to be more common.
I mean, that part seems to be more interesting than this policy, right?
Sure.
So I think we probably want to not leave somebody wondering like, oh, there's a policy. And
Sure.
I don't know how to apply it. So I would love to see it in the text or maybe
I would,
reference below.
I suggest in the text, I actually, as I was reviewing it, I added it in the text tonight, right before I came, so I think that is probably best.
Another thing I'm wondering is that big chunk of green stuff that's added after item F. It says the class rank shall be based on the GPA calculated pursuant to this policy. It's actually pursuant to the guideline that's authorized by the policy. And shall identify students in the top 5 and the top 10% of the class. So what does that mean?
So this was all Neola's recommendation, and Mr. Gunnerman and I really worded it down already. So I think it just means by the end of the 11th grade, it is calculated based on these things, including or not including these things that are listed above it.
And put on the student's
And-
transcript.
And if you are indicated in the top 5% or 10%, that's noted on the student's transcript.
So it still gives them a rank, like 32
Yes.
out of
Yes.
200 or whatever. And then it would say top 10%, or would it say like 8th percent?
That's a good question, and I don't know what it's looking like yet.
Okay. So is this in the statute, or is this just Neola's recommendation?
That we actually notify them, the student?
That it shall identify students in the top 5% and the top 10%? Because a shall statement in a policy is pretty heavy. So I'm wondering if this is based on statute, or if this is like an invented requirement so that we can let people know what their percentile is. Because we could just say that a rank and percent should be listed for every student. Like, what difference does it make? I just don't, I would advise against creating requirements if we're not absolutely certain that this is something that, yeah, Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, that was something that I had thought of too. So under this policy, it seems like we're only notifying students and putting it on their transcript if they're in the top 5 to top 10%, correct?
So I think this is something that we'll need to clarify with student services because they work with the transcripts. I do believe, and I don't know, Mr. Pat or Dr. Siebert, if you know, is there a letter goes home and indicates if the student's in the top 5 or 10% now?
Answer that, yes.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This has to do with the UW early
Right.
admissions program, basically.
And so I guess,
I'm just going to repeat because you're not mic'd, but Mr. Schloman has commented that there's a letter that would go home that would notify that they are in the top 10 or the top 5.
The letter actually indicates that they are direct admit to the UW system. I don't think it states that they're in the 5 or 10%.
Okay, that's an important clarification.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Do we understand the rounding rules of this particular direct admit? Do we? I'm just wondering. I don't think we do. Like if I'm in the 10.46%, or if I'm in the
Yeah,
5.1.
no, I think the calculation is the top 10%. And I think the additions to this policy are specifically targeted at, and I think your question about the statute, I don't think there's anything in the statute that requires that. And there's nothing in the statute that actually requires us to participate in the program. We just participate in the program voluntarily.
Yeah, because I guess my question is, would it not be valuable for, if I'm a parent of a kid who's in the 11th percent, but getting into that top 10% means that I get into the UW school that I want to go to, would that information not be important to be notified so that you can maybe, take measures to try to improve your GPA so you can get into that top 10%? Like, it seems like we should be maybe not necessarily sending a letter out to every student about it, but there should be some sort of clarification to where they stand so that if you're on that bubble, you can kind of strategize and see what you want to do to get into that top 10%.
Students definitely have access to their GPA and their transcript at any time. They can see that on the Infinite Campus portal. So at this stage where that's being calculated, it would already be too late for them to do that because the direct admit letters come out at the end of their junior year, basically.
Yeah, and on their transcript, they will see their class rank and out of how many students, so they'd be able to figure out their percentage from that. I do wonder if we want to clarify if this is state statute, if that is part of it, or if it's just Neola, because I think we would like to get rid of that end part as well, and not, I don't think that is necessary if it's not state statute.
I could help with that, Dr. Piasek. So in 11858, which is the statute that's referenced at the end, it does say that each class ranking shall identify those pupils who rank in the top 5% of their high school class and those pupils who rank in the top 10% of their high school class. And then it further says the class ranking may also identify the class rank of pupils who do not rank in the top 10% of their high school class. So that is direct language from the statute that Neola is putting into the policy.
So it's probably more of a criticism for our state lawmakers, but it's kind of redundant, right? I mean, well, I'm hoping people are in the top 10% of their class know how to calculate the top 10% of their class, but maybe they don't. So it doesn't change anything about our transcripts. We already have
Correct.
N of
Yep.
N. So we could include, so all that stuff in the green right there is per the statute saying you have to at least tell somebody if they hit these thresholds and that they can go to UW without making any effort to apply to any other schools. So, and a lot of it is redundant. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. There's just a lot of extra stuff in here that says the same thing like 3 or 4 times. So I think we're saying there's these categories that need some explanation for how they get weighted, that we're going to calculate rank based on that formula, and that we're going to notify people if they hit the 5th or 10th percentile trigger that allows them to get in automatically. I guess I would like to clean this up even more, because I think pointing to the actual how we calculate the GPA is probably more critical than all of this stuff.
And like what Ms. Ryan had shared earlier, we had looked at some other, other districts around us, and it just varies greatly based on their last revision. But since this direct admit is new, we can take it back and after we had some of this conversation here, work a little bit more on it and then bring it forward again. That's why often these have the discussion and possible action, because oftentimes, like our next policy, we wanted to have a discussion and then work a little bit more once we had understood kind of some of your thoughts. So we can take this back, work some more on it, and then bring it forward for more discussion.
The administrative guidelines does say how each one of those things are calculated, which is why we didn't put them in here as well.
Yeah.
But we could collapse.
Yeah, I don't know that all of that needs to be in the policy
Right.
either, like all the letter items. So I think there's always these things that pop up that we don't even have in here, like we don't know what to do with them necessarily. And we're not specific, but while we talk about study abroad and alternative and homeschools, we don't actually talk about transfers from another school. So if somebody comes in with like IB credits from a private school, do we weight those the same? And that's gonna be in the guideline, but it's kinda not. And then, the other part that wasn't even on the top, like on the docket for change is that last sentence or that last section about the designation of 1 and 2. And it talks about 4 semesters in grade 11 and 12 in the district. I don't know that we have any guidance about what school. So if a student transfers from one school in the district to another school in the
Within
district
the district.
that doesn't offer as many AP courses, what does that look like? Or to a charter, for example. So we might need to be clear about that. I'm done, sorry. Mr. Zenobia.
Just a clarifying question. So the notification is part of the transcript that goes out, or is that separate? Are we doing that now, or how does that work?
We did that this year. It is a separate letter that goes out. Yeah.
But the ranking and is on, where they can find it, but it's also on the transcript. was that-
And
Correct.
Has always been a
It's not in the
transcript, yes.
notification, but basically the notification, the form letter that says you've been directed admit to the UW system if you choose to go there.
And that's additional this year, or in the past year?
We did that last year. That was the first year, yeah.
Thank you.
I just note too, in the statute, the shall language is in the statute. So while it normally doesn't appear in a policy, it's just quoting the statute.
Yeah, I think it's just important that we know what that means, because I think the language after the shall is a little bit ambiguous. You know, it says shall be based on the GPA calculated pursuant to this policy, and I'm like, okay, so you shall follow your policy, which is kind of what it is. But then it says shall identify students. I don't know what that means. Identify to who? To them, to their parents, to us, to the transcript?
I read it as, yes, redundant, again, by just saying we shall identify the students, and if you jump down to the end there, by noting their ranking on the student's transcript. That we identify it by noting it on the student's transcript. And again, from Neola, if we had already been doing that, I don't know if others hadn't been doing that.
So I see that's in the second sentence,
Yeah.
right? So the first sentence is also kind of meaningless, right? It says,
Yes.
you shall follow this policy and you shall identify these students. And then after that, it says, once you've followed this policy, now you should notify each student. And you shall note that ranking on their transcript. But only at the completion of 11th grade. Okay,
I don't know that it's only, but it has to be
okay.
Part of the state mandate is, it has to be done at the completion of 11th grade.
For the scholarship and direct admit.
Is there a reporting to the UW system about who these kids are? Is that who we're identifying them to?
I believe so.
Okay. Is that automatic? Do the students do they need to opt in to being identified?
No, we don't have an opt-in process. We automatically send that.
Okay. So I'm assuming it's to identify or to disclose. Is there any language in the statute about that? Or it just says shall identify? Probably whatever describes what you have to pull and communicate, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think
there's-
that would be important.
It's redundant in the statute too. So there's a 4A and a 4B that say the exact same wording as we have in the policy.
Okay. I'm open to what others think about, replicating these words in our policy. They're in the statute. So the policy is that we're going to comply with the statute, which means we're going to we're going to put it on, we're going to calculate it, we're going to put it on the transcript, we're going to tell the students, and we're going to tell the UW system.
Could we simplify the last screen with getting rid of the first two lines and just use the third and fourth line at the bottom there and change it after 10, and the top 10% of the class by noting the applicable ranking in the student's transcript at the completion of 11th grade?
Yeah, you're saying take out the first sentence and
Yes.
just make that change. That seems reasonable to me, yeah. What do you guys think?
I've learned a lot more from this discussion than this policy, that's for sure. I mean, it is, there's a lot here, obviously, that we're not communicating at all in the policy. So I don't know if that's as important, or we're just going to, as you mentioned, regurgitate the statute and go from there, which, yeah, it's a little confusing, especially the added part that's all green from when students are being notified of what the purpose is. Then there'd be a little bit of concern, which it doesn't sound like it's there, but for students to not know that they're close, I think Mr. Brooks made that point already. So, I don't know if that needs to be in the policy, but I think that would be important for some who would want to go that route, so.
So we just have the numbers right now, but will we be adding the percent? Or only to 11th graders?
I don't think we're planning to add a percent listing on the transcript, no.
Okay.
The number calculation you should be able to determine that, basically.
It says shall note the applicable ranking on the student's transcript at the completion of 11th grade.
We definitely have the ranking, yes. So, but it's not a percentage ranking.
I don't know what the word applicable means either. It's just an extra word. Yeah. Maybe Mr. Brooks can explain. I don't know.
We don't always get the language right.
Yeah. So, okay. It's ranking, not percent. But we have to notify them of the percent, and that's coming as a separate communication.
Correct, that's the letter they get saying that they've been approved for a direct admit.
This one is and shall note. Need the and then.
Okay. This is relevant to our current juniors, yes?
Correct.
And when is that communication? Would be at the end of the school
Summer.
year?
It would be in June, basically. At the end of, once school's completed, and then we'll calculate it and send the letters.
Mrs. Koenig or Mrs. Kozlowski, do you guys have anything? Is there any time sensitivity to getting this approved tonight?
No.
I mean, I like the change that you suggested. I don't really have a good reason to suggest any other ones, so I don't know that there would be significant modifications that anybody would come back with or would want to see. Are we assuming that there's no change to the guideline? Like the way it's calculated is not changing?
Part of the conversation was how detailed do we want the policy to be, and do we want that in a guideline versus do we want to take some of these pieces out of more details about the calculation, have that in the guideline? I think we could go either way with the policy and the guideline.
We did look at the wording in the guidelines. We didn't change nothing's changed how things are calculated, but there are some redundant words in the guidelines as well that we took out. And there is a statement about honor roll that we need to have a discussion with because 2 of the 3 high schools do not have an honor roll. one does. And then just, again, just some wordiness, but nothing about how things are, nothing changed about how we calculate.
Mrs. Koenig?
Thank you. I do greatly appreciate the work you've done on this already. I mean, looking at what you have, the fat you've cut, it's amazing that there is so much extra wording that doesn't need to be there. I feel like the points are clear. I would be fine with, voting almost as is, but if you feel comfortable that maybe you could revisit and just do a little bit more cleaning, for another few weeks and then bring this back. I think maybe it'd be a lot easier to understand, even with a little bit more of the wording trimmed. I mean, as long as it's not time sensitive, if that would be,
Well, and we can bring it back with the AG alongside, having conversation of that together with, like, both of them. And then maybe even bringing the letter just to ensure that that's included with referencing the percentile rather than the rank. The rank on the transcript is just something we've been doing. It's not about this or 11th grade. So part of that is we've been doing a lot of this.
standard, right? Yeah, you've always done that.
Yeah.
I think one other thing that we just need to be really thoughtful about is not changing, so that we can't change an administrative guideline that affects something this significant, right? There's real dollars and admission criteria attached to class rank now. We can't do that halfway through somebody's high school experience in a way that significantly shuffles the deck. So not wanting to control the administrative guideline, I think from a policy perspective, we at least want to say something to the effect that the administrative guideline has to be applied fairly so that it doesn't significantly disrupt class ranking. If students are operating on one strategy and then, come junior year, it's like, we're going to wait, I don't know, some elective track for some reason. I just want to be cautious about that.
Yeah, we're not looking to disrupt what's going on in play. We just wanted to have this conversation knowing that the administrative guideline is here and that they're all very wordy. And as we'll have to, once this is all said and done, then communicate, where the information is, what the calculation is. And then if there's additional letters that we do need to be writing, we can do that too. So, but like I said earlier, we can bring it all back together as a package.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. This has a little bit less to do with the policy itself, I guess a broader question. So, this legislation was passed in the last session and, some people picked it up, but I think for a lot of people it flew under the radar. Have we communicated as a district to parents that this is now, if you graduate in the top 10% of your class that you get direct admission? I just wanted, because I could see a lot of parents just not having any idea that this is now in law.
We have communicated, really, Mr. Leonard from Student Services has worked with tech on the communication, but we have communicated to families, and that's where the process with the letter, we didn't always do that prior to that coming into place.
Thank you.
I think, nothing for you. I agree with Mrs. Koenig that it's subtle stuff. So I could go either way, but if it's not time sensitive and we want to just bring it back all cleaned up with the guideline next month, that would be preferred.
Yep.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, next is discussion and possible action on an update to Board Policy 5505, academic honesty.
Yeah, so my friends are going to join us, Ms. Ryan, Mr. Schloman. I think you've met them before. So last month, we brought this policy forward for discussion, and based on that conversation, really, we went back and did some revisions, and so we just wanted to bring it forward again tonight to talk through some of the pieces with the AI particularly. I'll pull it up, just one sec, and then Mr. Sloman can speak to the AI piece that was revised. Can you try sharing it? Oh, no, I got
The AI is blocking us from displaying it.
it. Sorry.
Here we go. So we made some significant changes, obviously, to the AI portion of this. And really the intent was to sort of walk a very delicate line here between maintaining control in the classroom for the teachers to be able to control when AI is used and when it is not used, but also not giving them the ultimate power to say we will never use these tools or you are forbidden from ever using these tools in our classroom. So that was the intent, basically. We were trying to walk that delicate line, and I think the revision that you have here hopefully is not as wordy as the last one. And we didn't use AI to write it, so we're in good shape there. But yeah, so I would leave it open for discussion, and we can wordsmith that or talk about the different components of it as needed.
Okay, Mr. Zenobia.
Looking at the changes, I think it's a great revision. I'm sorry. I think it's very important to have something in place, and I think I've said that in previous meetings, but I just appreciate the work that went into it, and looks good.
So I missed last month's meeting because I was at a conference on AI. And I listened to the conversation. I really like what you guys did with the policy, but I can promise you that what we think we know about AI today will be different a year from now and will be significantly different 2 years from now. It's moving so fast. The compute potential is moving very fast. And while, I laughed when Mr. Schloman said we didn't use AI to write it, and I could say, I can tell, because today you can tell if someone's using AI to write things. We won't be able to tell down the road. It's going to be very, very difficult to identify what's been done by a computer versus a human. They'll be capable of doing human thinking, and you can just tell at what grade level and, sample. It will be beyond anything that we can even imagine right now. So I think what you've done with it is very appropriate, because we've said we're not escaping this, but we have an expectation that students learn. So I have one word that I need to ask about, and that is, there's a word may that's in the second to last sentence of that paragraph, and it says, for specific assignments and assessments designed to evaluate a student's individual understanding and abilities, teachers may require original work without the use of AI. So if we want someone in to demonstrate their individual understanding and abilities, I guess I could see using it for finding references, writing a paper, that sort of thing, but may require. I mean, would there be any, I don't know, maybe tell me what you think the exceptions are, or why would you may?
Right, the thinking there was, there are times when you just want to see what I can do, right? I really just want to see what you're doing, not what you're doing with AI's help. And so I think the second sentence then clarifies that, and it says the teachers will state that, basically, say, okay, this particular assignment, we're not going to use any AI tools. I want you to do it just on your own, because, I mean, the goal of AI is to help us sort of accelerate our learning. And if it's replacing our learning versus accelerating our learning, we do not want that. At some point in time during the year or at checkpoints, it would seem appropriate that, instruction would say, hey, we're not using AI today, so I want to see how you've improved your writing or your mathematical skills or whatever it may be. So we're not going to use AI today, so I want to see if you've really used AI to help improve your knowledge and your learning. So that's the intent, basically, to say today is the day we're AI free, right?
And I think that's captured in the third bullet under AI tools may not be used when they violate teacher-specified expectations for particular assignments. So the sentiment of that paragraph for me is you can basically use AI, but a teacher can sometimes tell you that you can't. That's just how I would summarize the tone of the paragraph. I would prefer it to say, we're going to allow you to use AI, but you can expect that there will be times where it will not be allowed, which is just a different expression of, like, we understand that this is here and we're going to work with it. And I'm, frankly, I don't know that the tone that I'm expressing is really going to be captured in the policy itself, but I'm struggling with that part. Mrs. Koenig?
I think I thought about that too, and I think the word itself, because it basically says for specific assignments and assessments designed, I almost feel like it should say the teacher will require original work. Because you're stating for specific assignments that there's that option, instead of may, the teacher will require, original work without the use of AI. Is that more or less? I felt like that would be a little bit more direct, like there will be times, just so that they're aware, there will be times that the
Yeah.
teacher will require no use of AI.
I just take it as we're saying the board is giving the teachers permission to suggest that the students don't use AI. And I think what we'd rather say is, like, if you're going to demonstrate mastery of subject, it's likely that you're not going to be using AI to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about this, I think that it was important for us to reference the teacher in the statement, right? So to give credit to the teacher and say the teacher is still really commander-in-chief in the classroom, right? And they have the ability to request you to not use AI for an assignment at any point, but yet still understanding that, in general, you're not just going to forbid AI on every assignment, because, that's, the administration is going to talk to you about that then, because it's like, hey, we can't just forbid this all the time, because we're leaving our students at a competitive disadvantage if we don't expose them to it.
Would anybody be open to just adding a few words before the phrase for specific assignments? And I would suggest something like, students should expect that for specific assignments and assessments designed to evaluate a student's individual understanding and abilities, teachers may require. Or something to the effect of, it shall be expected that.
And keeping may though then?
Keep everything else the way it is, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
So it shall be expected that.
You said
Or student, I just noticed that we said students about 7 words later, so maybe
Oh.
I can say students Should expect, or it shall be expected that.
Students should expect that for specific assignments and assessments designed to evaluate their individual understanding.
Sure. Mrs. Koenig, does that kind of satisfy your?
It's getting at what you were saying, keeping the word may, but yet implying that it will be, it probably will be expected.
And, just apologize to everybody. I know it's a tone thing, which in a policy is sometimes kind of irrelevant, but I think for stuff like this, it's all new. Did you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the work that you guys have done on this policy. I know when we talked about this last month, it was more just kind of the idea forming stage of things, but, I like that there's a lot more latitude for teachers to determine when and when they don't want to use it while still acknowledging that this is a reality and we don't want to put our students at a competitive disadvantage to just blanketly say, you cannot use this. And I really appreciated in the first paragraph, highlighted in green, that talks about so that each student learns the skills being taught. Because that was always kind of my concern with this, is that if we're essentially replacing the learning with this, I think Mr. Schloman said this perfectly, right? It's to accelerate learning, it's not to replace it. Last time we were kind of talking about, well, maybe we grade the prompt that they plug into the AI. But that's not, you're learning how to write a prompt and you can ask ChatGPT to correct your prompt for you. That's not a replacement for the learning. It's not an analysis, that's not a good way to evaluate whether somebody's mastered the lesson that they're supposed to be learning. So I appreciate that was included in there and kind of the commentary that you provided, because that was always my concern, is if we're just reducing these huge lesson plans that we have our teachers working hard on down to what a student types into an AI chat box, not only is that not giving us the best read of where our students are at academically, but it also kind of diminishes the work that our teachers do. I mean, I've worked with students where they are allowed to use voice to text to type assignments or to ask Google questions. And then now they're just using voice to text to type their entire paper, and it doesn't always turn out well because voice to text isn't perfect and it doesn't punctuate everything, but you're not teaching that kid to read, you're just teaching them how to talk into a computer. And that's not the learning target that we're supposed to have. So, no, I think, and especially with the change that Dr. Piasek had suggested, I think this is really good foundation. I appreciate the work that everybody's done to get it to where it is.
So, Mrs. Ryan, what is the text that you're captured? Students,
Students should expect that for specific assignments and assessments designed to evaluate their individual understanding and abilities, comma, teachers may require original work without the use of AI, NLP tools.
okay, thank you. If there's no further comment, this is also for possible action tonight. Anyone?
I move the policy as amended.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we're going to start our content areas with science tonight, with discussion and possible action on the middle school science resource.
Hello, everyone. So I was here in January to review the process we had gone through for the middle school science resources, and we had brought TCI, Bring Science Alive, to you as the resource we would recommend, and then you had a couple months to kind of go through and look at the resource and kind of dig into what we have. Just as a reminder of the things we went through, the main features of this resource was that it followed that 5E model. It had that anchoring phenomenon storylines. It had a lot of that computational thinking, data analysis, and engineering built into it. as well as obviously having that Spanish language support, which we felt was a critical part of a resource for us. As we looked through the costs, we're looking to pursue an 8-year digital license, as well as hardcover classroom sets. When they come in the quote, they're looked at like bundles versus digital access. So, but really when we pull out the cost, the classroom sets are that $15,000, as well as those lab kits, which is the initial investment of the equipment that they will need to do those, and then the consumable costs after that initial purchase is part of the building science budget that they would manage, and they've already have that in their budgets now. So this would keep us on the same cycle as high school, being 1 year after them, which I think is a nice cycle, so that we can make sure that we're working as a consistent program and not divided.
And Ms. Yassen, I did an analysis of a 6-year, 7-year, and 8-year adoption and found that the 8-year adoption was the most cost-effective and gave us maximum access to the resource at the lowest price.
In addition, it also fits well with our revised timeline where we're trying to align literacy and math so that this would not come due at the same year literacy or math would. So just trying to be mindful of all those pieces together.
Any questions beyond what we've kind of reviewed these last few meetings?
I just want to clarify, was there a typo in the original document that was attached because it said a 6-year digital access in the?
So we originally were looking at that, and then after going through all of the pricing options that TCI had, we decided that the 8-year was going to be the best option.
The price is the same though?
Yep.
Okay. Well, then it is the best option. Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't reading one of them wrong.
I like to credit my negotiation
Yeah,
skills, but I think it might just be what we get.
Good job. Okay. One other question that I didn't ask a couple months ago. Are there any students that won't be using this resource?
All students at Horning, Butler, and Les Paul will use
Cover
this.
everybody, including anyone who's like finishing up in a personalized learning, because this is
Correct.
part of that.
Yep, and they currently have access to the curricular resources we already are using, so it wouldn't
Yeah,
be a big shift for them.
okay. Anything else? All right, this is also on the agenda for discussion and possible action. Ms. Kozlowski?
I would motion to approve the recommended resource for middle school science as presented.
Second.
Okay. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, I should have said. Anybody opposed? All right, it passes 5-0.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
All approved. Say aye. All right, transitioning to social studies, a discussion about AP economics.
So we have our high school group coming up, just talking about discussion about this resource.
Thank you.
It's always good to appear before this august body. Thank you.
Okay, as I'm loading here. I am here with our AP Econ team with leader Amy Reynolds from Social Studies Coordinator and our teacher rep, Carl Millard. He is social studies teacher at Waukesha West, and he teaches both semester econ and AP econ. And then there's a north teacher and a south teacher who have the same teaching, both loads there, who usually join us as a team. So this probably looks familiar to you. It is the same template that we used earlier this year when we talked about AP literature and AP psychology. So again, it just is really just summarizes the 7 principles of what an AP placement program is, and talks about at the end here on the left-hand side that individual teachers, but really we talk about a team of teachers. So 3 teachers and met with eAchieve today, and we'll be bringing in their AP Econ teacher as well in order to really kind of revise the curriculum, select the readings, assignments, and the resources. Also, just as a quick reminder, that College Board provides this opportunity for high school students to earn college credit by partaking in this college level study and by taking an exam at the end of that. And then College Board provides us with the course framework that is divided into units of study. Each unit comes with sample questions, multiple choice, and the free response questions. And the College Board also provides us a digital platform in the form of AP Classroom, and we'll be talking a little bit about that this year. In a minute here. So as we have started with our others, we wanted to just kind of start with the 5-year data for, specifically for AP Econ. If you can look over the last 5 years, you can see that our enrollment is declining a little bit. It is one of our most challenging AP classes, so very different probably from the numbers that you saw in AP Psych. With this class, it is actually 2 full AP classes within 1 year. It is microeconomics and macroeconomics, and they teach it in 1 year, and at the end of the year, in May, students can take both tests to earn up to 6 credits. It is a class that does not really have any underclassmen in. It's predominantly seniors who would take this course. So when you're looking at this data, you can see the macro is the top, the lighter color, it is how many students took the test, and then below it in the same lighter is the percentage that passed it each of those years, and the micro test would be the number and percent passed the micro test. So that 2024, remember, is last year, is May 2024. So this year, 2 of our 3 high schools actually are offering the class, and we have a total of about 39 students in, plus I think 10 for eAchieve. So it would be a total of 49. Next year's numbers are up from there. It will be offered at all 3 high schools next year to about, right now, there's enrolled about 67. That could go up or a little down from that. I'm going to transition now over to Amy and Carl, and Amy will start with kind of giving you a big overview, and then Carl will talk more specifically details to the class.
All right. So the course, as you can see, was first offered in the school district in the 2006-2007 school year, so it first appeared on student transcripts in 2007. Since its inception in School District of Waukesha, so that point there in 2006-2007, Carl has been teaching the course, so he'll be able to give you a very detailed overview of what the courses look like and any changes over time. You'll notice that the year of our current textbook is 2018, and to that point, since the course was offered in School District of Waukesha, we've been using the Krugman textbook, which is the textbook that we'll talk a little bit more about. We are currently looking at the 3rd edition of it, so this would be the 3rd update to that book. We're using the 2nd at this point in time. So that's been 19 years of using that specific resource. In 2022, so just slightly after the current textbook was adopted, there have been some changes that Carl will review to the micro and macroeconomic courses, which the newest edition of the textbook would address. And then, like the other AP courses that we've discussed, just a point to remember that the exam this year in May, both of those exams will go online. So that's definitely a piece we'll come back to as we talk about the use of AP Classroom and some of the practice resources within the textbook.
So so next slide. So with the course being reviewed and updated in 2022 by the College Board, from a microeconomics lens, the mic a little closer, Nothing really changed. A lot of the content was basically the same in micro. In 2022, you could use a calculator. That was about on the test. In macro, you could add the calculator, but the big new change there was in macroeconomics, we updated to better reflect central bank policy. In 2008, with the banking crisis, central banks, Federal Reserve, really expanded the money supply. We now live in a land of ample reserves, and I don't want to get too policy wonky on us tonight, but basically the traditional legacy tools of monetary policy, changing the money supply with the discount rate reserve requirements and open market operations, isn't done anymore. We still have to teach it, but there's billions of dollars sitting in banks. The money supply isn't going to change. So the AP program updated to better reflect how the central bank is acting. So they now change interest on reserves. The book would now reflect that. And that's kind of a big deal come test time. Next. So again, precise alignment. What's really important for us as boots on the ground staff is that the new book would really nicely align with AP Classroom. The 6 micro units in the book align with the 6 micro units in AP Classroom. Same thing with macro. So as we assign work from the book, the test bank from the book, we can also assign practice work from AP Classroom. Kids are always saying, we need more practice, which is a great thing for kids to ask. This would facilitate that.
I'd also add there, you'll note that it says that there's a module structure to this textbook. So many of our students who are taking AP Econ have also taken AP Psychology, which has that same modular structure. And so they'll be familiar with that, which helps with the fluidity of the practice and the use of AP Classroom. So it's just continuing to build on those practices. And then also the use of the test bank questions for practice within this resource, and then also with AP Classroom to build that true common assessment and common experience for our students at all 3 high schools, and also at eAchieve. So, did we jump ahead? I think we jumped ahead, Laura. Can you back up a little? Yep. Slide 8. When you go to the... I have this one. This is the... Well, that's fine. We'll just go with that one. Okay. Yeah, see, it was that one that was just there. Right there. There you go. Technical difficulties. Okay, well, so anyhow, we'll just, how about we go with well, AirPlay, and I am...
This one?
Yes, you can try that one again. We'll see what happens.
Well, I'm just going to leave it like that.
Okay, that's fine too. So this is what I think would be particularly important for us to share with teachers during the planning process, but also if we were to onboard new teachers at any point in time over the course of this course. Because what you'll see is the unit lesson plan suggestion. So it offers everything from suggested resources and readings to a pacing calendar, so to speak, number of days or class periods to spend on each of the modules. It also offers some icebreaker community building activities, some bell ringers to start class. So a lot of those teaching strategies that we would want teachers using and students kind of experiencing, along with, again, some teaching tools here and a reminder of the focus of the unit overview. So this would really support that common framework for a unit and that common experience across the district. These are tools that teachers can use to build their own practices.
So the next slide, we see AP Classroom examples. So on the left side of the screen is what you might expect from a multiple choice type of prompt. So you have a graph to interpret and some options there. Economics is very, very graph heavy. On the right side is a free response question. So there's multiple choice at the top, but the boxes down below, that's a payoff matrix. That's what you'd see with the free response piece. So you're not dealing with long written responses like you have in other AP courses. This is looking at material and interpreting it and having a short type of response, free response.
Okay, back to our unit example slide. So building off what Carl said, this is what the textbook and the unit itself would look like. And so what you'll see is on the left-hand side, that is the unit, that is the reading. Students are responsible for that reading prior to coming to class and discussing. But then you'll also see the tools that they have access to independently for their own practice and their own review, along with what could be supported by AP Classroom practice under the guide of the classroom teacher. So there are opportunities for students to check their understanding, to practice multiple choice questions. There are test-taking tips built throughout the text as well. So again, you can just see that the unit is certainly the information, but the Krugman resource does a very nice job of prepping students for the test. And again, remember, it's ultimately the goal is 2 tests, not 1.
So we did bring a text for each of you that you can take your time perusing for the next couple months. Stacy has them, so before you go, please grab them from Stacy. We are still, the team is really still in discussion right now about physical textbooks versus digital access. Because we would get, even if we have digital access, we always do a class set of physical text as well. There's really not that many more students than, 20 at each building for the classroom set. Carl really talks about liking to have the physical textbook that the kids can take home and read, because a lot of the reading needs to be done at home, and they do have the AP Classroom digitally. We do digital access for most all of our others. And with eAchieve coming aboard, they will have to have digital access. So we haven't pinpointed exactly what's going to be best yet. The team is still discussing what they would like there. And then, so when we come back in May, our plan would be to have that pinned down, have very specific cost for you. And then also begin on a course outline. So you can see our term of purchase would be somewhere between 7 and 10 years, depending on our AP renewal timeline. And then our implementation costs are very minimal. The only one change that might come there is we were not able to get the team together during Winter Institute because we did Avid Pathway training for all of our high school teachers. So they might need a day in the summer. The team works very closely together because they also all teach econ, and all of last year they were working on just the semester econ class, so they work very well together. So maybe a day in the summer that they would need to come together.
If I may, I'm sorry, just jump in. Because we are planning for 2 courses, not 1. I know that it's 1 year, but we have a lot of tests. So building those tests takes time.
Common assessments across the buildings. So what questions can we answer for you?
Ms. Kozlowski?
I loved econ in ways that I can't even begin to express. So, just truly, the charts are a great thing. But I know that we just approved econ. So then my next question is, over a lot of our curriculum, we've been able to apply the same materials at both a non-AP and an AP level. Is there an opportunity for this to be used in a non-AP setting?
I would hesitate. This is very advanced stuff. It's not to say that we couldn't cherry pick some lessons, but this gets into so much more content that a regular class would never touch.
Okay, I was just curious because we've had that opportunity that we were able to optimize
Agreed.
resources across different platforms.
Sure.
This is the only resource that is available, mainly because this is the one that aligns to the college boards. Correct? Same thing that we had with the AP psychology is,
Slightly different than with AP Psychology. AP Psychology there is one resource that aligns to the updated course, and that's the one that we brought here. There are other resources that exist for AP Econ. However, this is the updated version of the text that meets the 2022 course changes and is the resource that they are most familiar with. So it really isn't then learning something new as a team of teachers, all of whom have been teaching this course for quite some time.
okay, great.
So it's just updating their current version, not adopting a new text necessarily.
Got it, okay.
Mrs. Koenig?
Yeah, and you also said it's similar in structure to the other resources students are using, like with modules and things like that. So not only for teacher familiarity, but for student familiarity too would probably be very beneficial, right?
Mr. Zenobia,
Thank you.
the economist himself.
I'm very pleased that we still have it, so I'm very, very glad to see that. I think it's a wonderful course. You did mention something, Mr. Millard, about the questions and the way they were structured. Is that different from other AP courses? You had pointed that out. I was just curious if that, probably different from just regular econ, but is that a big change in the AP style?
I can't speak directly to, say, like a AP US history, but from what I've gleaned from my colleagues, and perhaps you could speak to as well, other AP courses have more like an essay style response, a lot more writing. We have writing, but it's like bullet point response writing.
So when we talk about AP Psychology, we talked about the EEQs, and we talked about the AAQs, and these are all different types of documents and analysis of those documents. The document would be the graph, and the response is far more straightforward, consolidated than like Mr. Millard's had, an essay response.
Okay, thank you.
And even drawing their own graphs, correct?
Drawing their own graphs, and a response could literally be like a one-line response on a free response. But then you'll have like one long question and two short questions, and you have 60 minutes for that. So, and then it's like part A, B, C, and D with bullet points underneath that. So that's to kind of give you a flavor of that. I'd be happy to make copies available, and you could try that in your free time.
I'll come with you. What are their prerequisites to take the AP?
None, and that's actually a question that some students sometimes have, is they think that they have to take regular economics. That's not the case.
There's no math, no minimum math requirement?
No.
Okay. How many kids do you think take regular econ and then also take AP?
Not many. I mean, it does happen, and I'm speaking from my West lens, so I don't want to speak for North or South. And that's kind of because they've taken the course. There's only so much time in a day. They're juggling different courses, AP offerings, and so
Yep.
typically if you take regular, you don't take AP.
Just putting it off to, if there's more seniors, I would think that they might not put it off until senior year. But, so how interleaved are the macro and micro?
They both have the same first unit.
Okay.
So you're learning the fundamentals of supply and demand. You're learning about comparative and absolute advantage, that kind of stuff. That's in both classes. And the textbook has the same, so let me back up a little bit. This past year, the past fall, my daughter was taking micro, I was teaching micro, and my son was taking micro at Whitewater. And that was really fun to see the progression and the speed that we were operating at compared to a college kid. When you get to macro, there's a little bit of a refresher on those basic concepts. But that's the only overlap between the two. Everything else is unique.
That was a great segue into my next question. So what is the advantage to a student taking the doubled AP versus us having transcripted college credit because micro's a semester, macro's a semester? And if what I see for the most part is that a lot of colleges will accept the AP credit, which is not the case with some of the other social studies and arts courses. So what is the advantage of us having the 1 year AP where we could otherwise just either outsource or transcript?
I don't know that we could transcript because we'd have to have someone who had a master's in econ in order for them to be able to teach that class and get the transcripted credit.
And I don't have that. And I don't know if Mr. Lehman at South might, but I don't know.
So the majority of schools, I think, do them together because the students like the fact that it's a lot and it's hard all at once, but we can do 2 tests at the end. I'm sure there are some schools who do junior year, maybe micro, and then senior year macro as well. Since I've been here, we've not entertained that, but certainly worth entertaining.
It's just a curiosity. I mean, being that it's a 1 year commitment, but it's actually covering 2 1-semester college courses. Seems like we could give some flexibility to that, which might help with the enrollment. I think 8 years is too long for a printed resource, just given the state of the Fed. So they didn't touch the test for 16 years?
It was kind of surprising how long AP took to catch up to what the central bank had been doing, the Fed. Yeah.
Well, if we're buying hard copies, it doesn't really change the price too much, right?
No, I think if we add on the digital, it's an extra $39 on tour to each one.
Okay. That's all I had.
Okay, we'll be back in May.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we're hitting on all the subject areas tonight. As we're transitioning, Mr. Zenobia did offer to teach AP Econ. So. For free. Which may be one of those you get what you pay for kind of situations. We are moving on to our Spanish resource discussion. Welcome.
Okay, good evening. I'm Dee Garcia, Director of Middle School Teaching and Learning and Multilingual and Global Education. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues here from West High School and from Les Paul Middle School. I'd like to have them introduce themselves.
Yes, hi. I'm Rachel Faust. I teach at West. I teach Spanish 1, 2, and 4.
And I'm Lindsay Syra. I teach Spanish at Les Paul Middle School, and this is my 20th year in the district.
Thank you. Ms. Kost-Schmidt, do you have the presentation? Very briefly, we're going to review the process that we undertook since August of this year with curriculum revision and review that ultimately is leading us to the point tonight where we'd like to make a recommendation for discussion on a curricular resource. You might remember that in 2012, our Spanish department had a very informal process in which they voted to continue to build their own curriculum. Since then, there have been massive shifts in pedagogy, particular to digital citizenship and use and tech integration, which has completely outpaced our resource. In addition to that, we have gotten very loose on our scope and sequence to the point where we are really struggling to get the kind of achievement that we want with the current resource that we are offering. And then lastly, we have had shifts in enrollment as well as shifts in our staff that really require us to provide a resource that supports and undergirds what we are trying to accomplish as a Spanish department. So the timeline for our year started out with, where is our timeline? Well, I don't see it. It's gone. Okay. Our timeline started out in August. No, it would have been previous. It's okay. It's okay. We started out in August through October doing a curriculum review, and we took a look at our root cause issue and the standards for world languages. We took a look at our scope and sequence and made a decision in October that we were going to go ahead and attempt pilot of at least 2 resources. So we looked at neighboring communities, what they were using. We looked at EHE, which has a recent adoption of one of our resources, and decided in October to pilot one in November through January and another one January to February. We have now analyzed those pilot outcomes. Are coming here to you tonight to make a recommendation, and we're hoping for a discussion this evening and potential approval moving into the spring. The resources under recommendation for tonight are representing 3 different levels of Spanish as a world language. We went to Curriculum Council last month and presented them with our team's recommendation for Reporteros for Spanish levels 1 through 4. Reporteros is a curriculum resource that is currently being used in eAchieve, and we would simply be using that for Spanish 1 and 2 and then folding up to 3 and 4. The same publisher, World Languages, also produces Generación AP. Generación AP is in its initial copyright right now, and so your access to this will be digital. I did provide a print resource for Reporteros for you, the teacher's edition, but the Generación AP will be on a sheet that you can log in and take a look at. The Generación AP would be the first ever resource that we've ever purchased for AP Spanish. Our teachers have been working with a completely self-curated curriculum and syllabus for that course. And then finally, we are recommending that we continue to use Azulejo. Azulejo never went through the curriculum design process. However, we do use about 80 copies in the district. We just don't have enough to cover the demand for the course. It is aligned to College Board, and at that level of AP Spanish literature, there are very few resources to choose from, so we decided to stay with what we have and to simply purchase the additional that we need with the digital accompaniment. So as we move forward to our data, we did survey our students, and we will go through our survey data of students and teachers. 80% of our students said absolutely, or they do support moving forward with Reporteros after their pilot. And we did work with students at the middle school and at the high school across all 4 levels of Spanish. Now, you won't see tonight survey data from students for Generación AP, which is the AP level resource, or Azulejo, and I'll tell you that the reason is because we could not find a publisher that would work with us to pilot another AP resource. Our pilot was too small, and so in reviewing resources, our team decided that they really wanted to use a resource with our students, and as a result, I'm making a recommendation to stay with a resource that is connected and aligned to the scope and sequence of Reporteros. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. I'd like to invite Rachel to talk a little bit about our look-fors. Don't know where the look-for slide went, Stace, but okay. The look-fors that we had from a teacher perspective was to find an alignment to the standards in particular and a clearly articulated scope and sequence from level 1 all the way through level 6. That is something that we really needed. We also needed a shift in pedagogy away from learning about language to language acquisition. We want everyone to be able to speak this language at the end of their experience with us, regardless of the level that they go through. We also need authentic resources that are actualized, that represent data, that represent science, that represent youth culture around the world. We wanted a large and robust battery of assessment, both pre and post assessment, diagnostic assessment, student self-assessment, peer assessment, and connected rubrics so that we did not have to create those in-house. We also need supports for differentiated learning. We have students that are from our dual language program that are in our Spanish department, as well as students that are coming and transferring, and students that have home language experiences that we know we need to provide a little bit of a different pathway. Also, we discovered in our analysis that we have a very high amount of students that have IEPs that participate in learning world languages, and we want to be able to serve those students in our classrooms. Finally, and most importantly for our teachers here, is providing our teachers with a coherent instructional resource that will engage all of their learners. So, Rachel, I'd like to invite you to talk a little bit about the analysis of our 3 resources tonight.
Actually got this one, Dee.
Sorry.
Hi.
We had an illness, so there's an abrupt last-minute change.
Yes, but that's okay, we got this.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Absolutely. So when we had the teacher analysis of the resources for Spanish 1 through 4, there were a couple of things that showed up that were some very positive things. The first one being there is a plethora of digital, audio, and visual resources. This is exceptionally important because one of the things that's very difficult to find when you're doing things on your own is audio and visual that is at the student's level, that's also clear, and is going to give them the confidence to be able to, again, interpret different speakers from different countries, different accents, and it therefore ensures that they're absolutely getting that authentic experience. Another thing that we saw that we absolutely loved was the ability to monitor student progress and assessment. And this keeps, this digital platform allows us to see, what the students are doing. It also allows the students to be able to get a lot of immediate feedback so that they can work on refining those language skills. The cultural focus that they have in Reporteros places really nice comparisons between the United States, their own community, as well as the featured country. And this is something that is also very important so that they make sure that they get a well-rounded view of the Spanish-speaking world. There are also online tutorials, and this is great for students who are going on vacation or who may be absent, that they don't have to miss the instruction. And it also gives other students that are listening to our instruction a different viewpoint. They get to listen to somebody else with these online tutorials, explain and give examples. Finally, the content in Reporteros is plentiful, and this provides teachers choices and students many different opportunities to delve into the content and, again, just practice getting that language acquisition.
So with regard to Generación AP, one of the things that the teachers really liked about this in giving feedback to us was the rigor of the resource. They no longer need to curate articles, curate video, and curate audio. They're able to find things which are aligned and are at the level of an intermediate high student. An intermediate high student is a student who is nearing an advanced level of Spanish language proficiency and will probably be using it in college and beyond professionally. Also, the teachers noticed in Generación AP that the organization of the unit and the lessons prioritize lifting students' background knowledge and connecting their background knowledge to the concepts being taught in the classroom. It engages students in inquiry and collaboration and lots of language learning and language use, which isn't always something that a teacher can bring independently without those instructional resources. Overwhelmingly, the feedback on that particular resource was the engagement of students in other youth culture across the world. So everything was very, very contemporary and very challenging often for teachers to get. Our teachers don't live across the world, they live here, and having access to a wide variety of resources curated at the level of advanced learning and being connected to each other is difficult. They really enjoyed that part. With regard to Azulejo, like I said, this is a resource that we're currently using, yet we don't have a resource for each student. We just need more of these resources, and we need digital access and a teacher's edition for our teachers. So we will be supporting our teachers with a recommendation that we do choose to add the additional resources that we need and then purchase the digital teacher's edition with the instructional supports for them as we move forward.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the student analysis of the resources. So this was what we found from the student survey, specifically with Reporteros levels Spanish 1 through 4. Also overwhelmingly, I heard so many students say that they loved the visuals in this digital platform. They loved the digital supports. They said it's aesthetically pleasing. They were able to understand all the maps. They were able to understand all the graphs. It was helpful for them, the visuals that were provided. Also, just the connection between language and, like Dee mentioned, the culture and different regions, places, but also tying it back to the United States was very helpful for the students. Many projects on cultural comparisons and countries, great for collaboration. They loved the projects. It was fun to see them collaborate in ways, in creative ways that normally they might not. Additionally, it was very, very enjoyable to see them be able to talk about different countries that maybe they knew nothing about and able to leave the pilot knowing at length things about a different country, a different Spanish-speaking country. So this was a big positive for the students. They mentioned multiple times in the survey that they could tell that Reporteros was targeted to their generation, and that was impactful for them. And additionally, just practicing speaking, listening, reading, and writing daily in class. Students said that they appreciated that it wasn't like they were just doing a reading activity for the entire class. They were able to do all 4 of these learning targets all within one class period. One thing that they did say, though, they said that the rigor of Reporteros was a little unexpected for them, which is good feedback for us to hear, to purposely plan our instruction for next year, knowing that that was their perspective that they gave us. As far as Generación AP, similarly with levels 1 through 4, there's lots of interactive group work, the same projects, collaboration for them to work on, and similarly as well, the cultural application and just the connection back to youth culture and their generation, things that are impactful for them. Another positive, significant writing application, which is very important, obviously going into taking the AP Spanish test.
So with regard to Reporteros and the unexpected rigor, that will inform our proposal tonight in terms of which levels we are proposing to purchase initially and what that might look like over the next 4 years. Also with Generación AP, the students' experience that they were able to get was based on a copyright 2026 edition. We were able to get 1 chapter of a text to be able to use with our students, but not the full digital version because it is still undergoing production. It will be available for purchase in its entirety July 1st. So the students in Generación AP didn't get the full digital experience for that reason. In Azulejo, again, we're seeking to purchase the additional print resources that we need and the digital resources for the teachers. We'd like to now tell you more about this, but we'd like to show you. Do you have the slide deck by any chance? Because we have an interactive slide with different pieces on it. Do you want me to project it? Is that possible?
If you know where it is,
Yeah.
take this down and you can try.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, the purpose of telling you and then showing you is to give you an idea of what this would look like in terms of student interaction. So here we are in the boardroom. Okay. So we're going to show you some key features of Reporteros in particular tonight. Rachel?
Yes. So for this first picture, what this first picture is highlighting for us is the accessibility and the access for students, and that there's lots of different speaking practice opportunities for them. It's on their iPad so that they can do these things from everywhere, like Lindsay mentioned earlier, right? Things come up, vacation, sickness, things like that, where students aren't in the classroom, and so the ability for them to record things on their iPad as if they were in class is wonderful. So being able to bring that iPad and to still get that authentic practice, even if they're not in the classroom, is a big positive. So bridging the gap, when they're absent.
Students were submitting audio files to their teachers who could evaluate it then and there and or in the future, and then it supports the student to build an audio portfolio of their progress over time, which was great. They had a lot of fun with it.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the scope and sequence. The scope and sequence is something that we've really never had to this extent in, at least in my history of being here. And so this was just like how wonderful for new educators to come in and to have it all set up for us so that we can collaborate and work together. And it really goes into detail exactly like the units and again how to plan for a block schedule, how to plan for a 50-minute period, and so that is extremely helpful for all educators and students.
The next point, just with this screenshot here, showing the responsiveness to the youth, just the visuals and the stories that are being told through Reporteros. A lot of it is, imagery of students, children near their age, and then just lots of stories about things that would relate to things that they're going through in their lives, things that are interesting to them.
For each unit as well, students have a guide, a youth guide from a Spanish-speaking country that welcomes them into the unit and then carries them through the unit with different anecdotes and videos regarding their experiences in their homes and their communities and their countries of origin.
The other thing that we've mentioned a little bit before is the ability that this resource provides to differentiate for all types of learners. It provides options for, again, those students who maybe have a background at home with Spanish, or even those that are like they're really into Duolingo and they want to do more. And it's so great because we talk about rigor, but a lot of these students, they want to push themselves and they really want to have a challenge. And then on the other hand, it's great to have an option too where you have some students that might be struggling, get them back the confidence that they need, whether they have an IEP or not, so that you can really get them, to really buy into the language, but feel comfortable and confident.
So one of the things that we have struggled with as a department over several years is being able to differentiate our rubrics to show the development of skills over time. So having a rubric just based on a target hasn't been sufficient for evaluating a student in a level 1 and a student who's in a level 4. So the rubrics that come with the resource allow not only for self-evaluation, but they allow for peer evaluation and feedback. They prompt for checks. There are rubrics for specific activities, but then there are something called integrated performance assessments where students have to read, write, and speak within the same performance assessment, and rubrics that help to inform students on the success of their learning at that time. All of these are aligned to the American Council of the Teaching of Foreign Language goals for levels, and so the rubrics are differentiated depending upon the progress of the student over time. In addition to that, this resource provides specific strategies for language learning. So if a student is learning to read a complex text, it will prompt the student to use strategies like translanguaging or putting that text into a quick paraphrase in their first language so that they can begin to comprehend over time. It helps to support them with the strategies that really proficient language learners can reflect back like, oh, that's how I became the way that I am. I really like the battery of assessment. Something that's important for us is often placement. We have students coming from parochial into our school district. We have students transferring in, and we often don't know where to place these students. This resource will also offer an opportunity for us to place students based upon their needs so that they continue to be successful and engaged in learning. So as we move forward, I'm going to recommend tonight that we take a look at a curricular adoption that folds in several levels over time with purpose. We mentioned that the rigor for our students was a little unexpected, and that is because the scope and sequence is clearly articulated and that we're applying it to students who've had a scope and sequence that is not as clearly articulated and or executed upon. So we are going to recommend a 7-year adoption for Spanish levels 1 and 2 and AP Spanish 5 and 6. And then next year, what that would mean is we would bring in the level 3, and then we would bring in the level 4 the year later, allowing every student that progresses up the opportunity to use the same resource over, over the years that they're participating. We're looking at going all digital with our students. There is a digital e-workbook that students can use that can be converted into Notability or PDFs through Notability. We think that is the most effective way to ensure that students have access. We also get 6 hours of professional development with the purchase of our materials, and we will get paper and digital teachers editions for our teachers. We would be looking at this adoption going through 2028, where we would take a look at revising and or renewal at that time. For professional development, we're suggesting that we spend 2 days with 5 teachers building our common syllabus and course outlines, which is typical of most content areas. We will be building a plan for common assessment and rubrics, reforming our targets, and then making sure that our Blackboard Ultra course shells are in place so that any new teacher hired now or in 2 or 3 years has access to the same high quality scope and sequence and instructional resources that we need. Those dates have not yet been determined, but that would be the plan. In terms of professional development, for year 1, we're looking at the onboarding of our teachers. There's an option to use Summer Institute, Winter Institute, as well as curricular time that we have during the school year. But then over years 2 and beyond, we'd be looking at doing that in-house. So our coordinator, who's currently on maternity leave, would be turning around this professional development and making it into an asynchronous experience for any new teacher that we would hire, which would include like a Blackboard professional development course that they could take and interact with. And we're just looking at hourly pay for that. And with this, we'd like to open it up to discussion and questions. Before we get started, I'd like each of you to know you do have a paper resource of reporteros in the back and then digital resources for everything else on the cart.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Kozlowski.
Okay, this is a lot, but thank you. So a couple questions, and just to slow down we have 3 sets of material that we're looking. Can you just bridge to me what their uses are for?
Yep, reporteros
Yep.
is for Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4. Generación AP is for Spanish language and culture, which is known here as Spanish 5. And then Azulejo is used for Spanish 6. I think we have it, just for your reference, back here on this slide, if you would need to take a look at that again.
Yeah, I have that one pulled up. I was still. So you mentioned that Spanish 1 through 4 is currently used in eAchieve.
Yes.
So with that, and we know scope and sequence and where they're supposed to be, have we looked at the data and the metrics on achievement that we've seen in eAchieve on
No,
that?
we have not, but we can do that.
It'd be interesting to take a look at moving away from a self-curated material, knowing that the rigor that you're seeing is there and what that looks like. But if it's already in use within our system, I'd like to be able to understand where our students are with that, and maybe any feedback on that, that
Sure.
would be good. And then my last question is on the pathway. So for students who may be in Spanish 2 right now, what would that mean for them in their next year?
It would mean going to Spanish 3 with our current curricular scope and sequence, and then moving into Spanish 4 with our current curricular scope and sequence and resources. We did pilot with a Spanish 3 course this year, and we found that we actually needed to offer those students Spanish 2 materials because they were not successful. It's a very common thing in world languages, and as soon as I asked for another option for how we could roll up use, they came out right away with you could choose to do just the first and second year and get kids used to the new resource and the pace and rigor of it. So that would be the plan for the next 2 years.
Okay, because then my only concern would be is trying to grow everyone at the same standards throughout the course, and how we, catch them up or get them at the same standards that we would see coming through.
Yeah, most certainly the scope and sequence of reporteros is going to influence what we would do to modify those courses to get students up closer to where they need to go. So we'll take a look at that.
Okay. No, I think this is good. That was all.
Thank you.
Long year, long time to be here.
Yes.
Congratulations, that's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And for
Thank you so much.
doing it all, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, is your daughter Grace?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I thought so, I looked at the last name, so yeah, I've been here a while, recognize some faces.
Mrs. Koenig?
Thank you, this was great. I love the progression, I love the rigor. I completely understand what you're saying. You can't really start like a Spanish 3 or 4 in a new system, because once you start in a certain way, it's difficult. Having 3 kids that went through, the previous last, 10 years, a lot of curated, a lot of differences, a lot of changeover, teacher leave, maternity, new teacher comes in. I did feel that it was a little disjointed, to no fault of the teachers, but just different methods, different materials. I love this idea. Anytime you can uniformly have a system and build from it, it does nothing but enhance the learning and rigor and retainment. So I do really appreciate this. This is great.
Would there be any students that don't use this resource as of 2028, these resources?
The only students who would not use these resources are students that attend our STEM middle school. They didn't participate in the pilot. The nature of their program would allow them to use the scope and sequence. However, they take their Spanish 1 and provide opportunities at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level to have a 3-year experience which culminates in Spanish 1. So we would simply have to fit our scope and sequence into how they curate their curriculum around their integrated arts. They would be the only students.
Okay. So any other 8th grader that's taking Spanish 1 is going to be taking the same, using the same materials as the high
Yes,
school students?
Yes.
But not STEM?
Correct.
Seems like it would be a disadvantage to those kids to transition to something in high school that they didn't have exposure to.
Well, we can certainly take a look at that as we also consider middle school course offerings in the future. I would agree with you that if a student's going to participate in Spanish and there's a continuum of learning in middle school, it should culminate in some agreed upon skill and achievement.
And then maybe just from a cost effectiveness perspective too, I don't know if there's a in-house resource that STEM is using or if it's something else that's purchased, but we should probably.
It's self-curated.
Okay.
And it's integrated with the choices that teachers are making around units, so it changes
Okay.
all the time.
Anybody else? I think
Thank
that's all.
you. Enjoy your materials, and we'll see you next month. Well, they're teacher's editions, so you'll be able to read on the side what they mean.
You can use AI for that.
Google Translate.
And also, Carrie, everything that's video has closed captions in English for you, if you need it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Please stay. Oh, I think we're here again.
All right, so we have, our final topic for tonight is a new one, and that is discussion on the updated state statute regarding secondary suicide prevention. Ms. Cameron, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just kick this off. So there was an update in state statutes, and as Mr. Pat and I have collaborated on a variety of things between teaching and learning and student services, like he alluded to tonight, what we're trying to do is bring forward topics in a uniform way prior to selecting curriculum. So you'll see in the past with Navigate 360, Student Services brought that information forward. So these changes in the state statute really prompted our Student Services and Teaching and Learning team to have some conversation around where are we at, what are some potential next steps. We have a team here tonight just to really represent both the teams, but just really to talk about, here's the changes, and here's some of our initial thinking. And of course, there's some work to do, and we would come back later on for potential action, given any resources, but we just wanted to share the update of the statutes and just get the conversation going.
Okay, thanks. We're back again. I'm joined with Laura Ryan, Director of Secondary Education, and Wendy Schwengel, Coordinator of Physical Education and Health Education for us, 612, well, K-12, right, Wendy? K-12. Yes, okay. Tonight, yes, we'd like to inform you a little bit about shifts in state legislation regarding suicide prevention. We will also go over just recently adopted policy on September 11th of 2024 by our Board of Education regarding the same. So I'll just refresh your memory with that. So tonight we will talk a little bit about the statute. We want to outline best practices regarding suicide prevention and communicate current approaches that we have to curriculum revision moving forward, as well as the process that we would like to use to review the curriculum resources that are available for this issue. But starting out, first and foremost, we wanted to put before you some data around student mental health and suicide that's gathered at the state level. This data was ascertained from the Department of Public Instruction regarding the YRBS survey data for the state of Wisconsin. And unfortunately, we do have students who are not thriving to the extent that we would like. We do see here at the state level that there's a significant concern statewide around suicide and plans for suicide. We wanted to take a deeper look at what that could look like in our district. So Mark Lenner, our Director of Student Services, provided us with YRBS data for both middle school and high school. The middle school data you see before you is as of 2021. Unfortunately, the data in 2023 was not accessible, but the YRBS survey was just given, I think, in the last month at our middle schools, so we'll have fresh data soon. But we asked students whether they were reporting problems with anxiety, prolonged and disruptive sadness, reported intentional harm, consideration of suicide, or a plan to attempt suicide. And I think that we can say that these numbers are concerning to us as community members and parents, for sure.
Similarly, we have the youth risk behavior survey for the high school. Ours is 2023. Same data that Dee just went over. You know, you can see that almost 50% of our high school students report anxiety, a third of them prolonged sadness, fourth of them reported intentional harm, and then are considering and or making a plan to attempt suicide. Obviously are extremely alarming numbers. And so that makes us, I think, as educators, think, how can we be proactive and help students in their mental health? As Dee said, just as a refresher, the state statute in September was updated and revised, and this state law establishes that schools now must address suicide prevention with students. It requires covering these four skills in grades 7 through 12, and that is teaching students how to make sound decisions, teaching them the knowledge of conditions that may cause the signs of suicidal cause and signs of suicidal tendencies, the relationship between youth suicide and drug and AODA, and then also giving students the knowledge of what some local community resources are to prevent and intervene. The state of Wisconsin, the law requires the state also to provide a model for youth suicide prevention, which DPI does. I believe in September, Mr. Pat and Mr. Lehner came to the board and discussed the revision to our policy 5350, which now reads developmentally appropriate student-centered education materials will be integrated into the curriculum of all health classes. And according to the statute, the content of these materials will do the following: encourage positive social and emotional development, teach life skills such as problem solving and decision making. Again, the curriculum really is, or the skills that they are trying to solve are decision making skills, providing knowledge of the relationship, again, between youth suicide and AODA, promoting awareness of warning signs, how to respond to potential suicidal persons, and again, the community resources that are available. And then, of course, stressing important, safe, and healthy choices and coping strategies for the youth.
And I will talk a little bit about our current state and the needs that we have. Right now, at the secondary level, at the high school in particular, we have a 9th grade required health class, which is half credit, which also can be taken during summer school. The problem we have right now with this statute, with the suicide prevention materials, are we do not have consistent and guaranteed materials presented. What we do have is inconsistent and individually curated many times. So what we really want to get is something that is across the board for all of our students to experience the same education on that. It's also not always insured or viable. We have done some things in the past where we've had student services that have come in, but that has also not been done on a consistent enough basis. So we want to make sure we also have the teaming there. At the middle school, we don't have a health class, so we are going to be taking our physical education course and putting in some health lessons, and that would include the suicide prevention. And again, the same thing, because we don't have a health class and we haven't had this material in there, that we are looking to get material and go through and figure some of this out with the resources that are available. The needs that we need to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum with the resources and instruction for all of our students. We need to align that with the state statute as well as best practices. And we want to develop a scope and sequence that we are offering this suicide prevention materials at the 7th grade level for the middle school and the 9th grade level in the health class at the high school. Does anybody have any generalized questions for us?
We'll finish.
Okay. Okay, so then at this point, we'll move forward to the look-fors. And these are the things that we're going to be taking a look at when we're reviewing resources. They've already gone over some of the things that we need to have because of the statute, so the making of the sound decisions, all the things that may cause the signs of suicidal tendencies, how youth suicide can be connected to drug and alcohol use, resources in the community that students can utilize to prevent and to intervene when necessary, and also some of the best practices that are highlighted there in yellow. The skill instruction, so they have the skill, they are introduced, presented, and then modeled the skill, the practice, so they have scenarios and feedback, and then the performance so that we can reinforce that in real life and transfer it to outside of the classroom. One of the things you'll see at the next bullet point is and this has been in more than just our district. We've connected with many districts to find out what they are doing also, and a lot of them are doing the same kind of concept right now of reorganizing and taking a look at what they have based on the statute. And we need to have something that's over a period of time. It can't be something that is just a one-day bang in, drop it, and move on, and we never talk about it again. So we're looking to view some resources that accomplish those things for us. We want to make sure that we have family or caregiver communication before these lessons would take place, during lessons based on what was being covered in the lessons, and then after the conclusion of the lessons. So we want to make sure that we have that we'll design as we get to that resource adaptation. We also want to make sure we have a connection with the school social workers that with certain units will come in and co-teach with the teacher who's doing the instruction. So those are things that we're going to be taking a look at when we're digging into the different curriculum that is available for us to choose from.
I just want to add to that is, I think one of the things Wendy had stated is that we have some inconsistency across the schools, and one of the inconsistencies would be the role that the school social worker is, and the state statute really says that we need to have a role of a social worker when we do some of these lessons, not all of the lessons, but some of the lessons. So we'd like to define that more clearly so it happens at each and every school. Also, depending on which school you're at, you may have 2 days of this, you may have 3 days, you may have 1 day. So we really want to outline, as we do this work, of a consistent, how much time it will be, who's going to be giving these lessons, what part they'll play, what the communication home will be. And in the yellow, you can see is a lot of the bullet points at top are the content that would be covered, but we are also looking for something that follows a pedagogy, like kind of like the gradual release almost, where we have a direct instruction piece. Then we have some sort of guided collaborative practice that the students can do with like making a sound decision. And then an independent performance of that. So really following that pedagogy as well.
And over this first semester, done some research into different resources available, and the plan is the resources that you can see up here. The DPI has lessons, Erica's Lighthouse, we have Ending the Silence, Sandy Hook Promise, Hazelden, and Navigate 360. and to take a look at those and vet all those resources based on the look-fors that we've talked about. And at that point, we would like to be able to come to you with our recommendation for which we should move forward with.
Yeah, we can open it up for discussion at this point.
So I'll start. Just a couple of things I want to say before I get to some questions. The YRBS is always an interesting data set because it does portray things that are concerning. But suicidality literally cannot be diagnosed through a survey, not to mention an anonymous survey or by an unlicensed professional. So I think we have to be really careful with the assumptions that anxiety equals suicidality or sadness equals suicidality. But there's no question that there's a problem with increasing suicidality among our kids. So I think as our teachers and educators are being asked to do more, we're putting a lot in their hands, we're asking a lot of them, and we're doing that as a trade-off to what is already limited time, but it's literally a life and death priority, right? So we have to figure out how do we measure success, which may be unmeasurable in this case, right? Because you can't ever get to the real answer because you don't know the answer. And I think you made a comment that it can't just be a one and done. The measure of success can't be done, check the box, we did it. It needs to be that we delivered something meaningful. The thing that I didn't hear, and it's not a criticism, it's more just, I think it's an opportunity, is how we engage the parents in this process. Because while we're talking about curricular adoption, this is one of those things, it's a little different than algebra. We absolutely need the parents to understand what is being talked about, whether it's in the classroom or in the gymnasium or on the field or whatever that is. But, and not just like, hey, we're going to talk about this today, but like really have open opportunities for the parents to understand, because these are things that have to continue at home. And then I think the stigma piece is a very real one, and that was another thing that, and I haven't looked into all of those resources, but a lot of those resources, well, all of those resources meet the statutory requirement, and then they've got all of this other stuff. So I think maybe it's an opportunity for us to understand what is really our opportunity and our goal with our students and their parents. And what does that look like for us? Because all of these packages are going to look a little bit different depending on who's created them, because there isn't a standard. So how would we measure success in this? Like, how would we know that we did it right or that we did it well?
I think, go ahead.
One of the things that the research says clearly is that students often feel very unsure of how to respond when a friend comes to them in need. And I would say that the measure of success would be a student being able to advocate for a friend in need by knowing either the concerns or knowing who to go to. I can share that just about 2 months ago, my son was told by a friend after school, classes were out, that this child attempted suicide on a Thursday evening. This was probably Tuesday of the next week. I'm really happy that someone had talked with my son and he knew what to do, which was to enter the school and find an adult and tell the adult. The adult called the social worker, and immediately the team came together and worked with this child. I think that's a measure of success when we have students that know how to respond to one another when there's crisis, because often there are signs and children talk. Obviously, there are times when children don't talk, but I would say that that's pretty significant when students trust our adults in the school and they have the skills to know what to do and the confidence to do it.
I think that's a really good point, that those skills and the skill development is important. You had some reference to modeling, practicing and performing. And that's something I think as you're going through the different resources, we just want to think about how we do that in an environment without creating the stigma issue or causing either withdrawal or an unintended response to that conversation, which I think can be tricky.
I think part of that, they've also been changing over time, the wording now, as to try to work on that stigma piece. And when we dive into these resources, those look-fors for us as a team are going to be extremely important because we want it to be done right. And we want the materials that we end up using to be able to do the things that Dee referenced. We want students to be able to know how to respond because they are children and they're not going to, a lot of adults don't know how to respond. So we want to equip our students as best as possible so that they have the best training that we can give them in hopes that that can, save someone's life. But like you said, you can't qualify that other than knowing that what we will be teaching will be something that hopefully will do exactly what Dee had said. And the piece with the parents, that would be another layer of, we've met a lot the last couple of days, I can't remember. But one of our prior meetings was about that communication piece. And as we develop the curriculum and build it out for that unit, we want to make sure that we do have that communication with the parents and we do have that engagement piece and take a look at what those things need to say, not something, hey, we're doing suicide prevention next week and that's it. Like, we want there to be, this will be with student services as well. That's part of that teamwork concept, that we develop something that helps the parents, also helps the parents know what they can get in the community, and then have them know exactly what is being taught and talked about, because there might be some carryover conversations that take place in certain homes afterwards. And we want the parents and the community to be prepared for that. And then also the follow-up when the unit concludes with more touching base and more resources and just making sure everybody is fully educated on it and aware of what's going on.
I would also add to that piece too, is that once we have a common like scope and sequence approach to this, I think it will be easier to bring people together to talk about, here's our plan. If your student is going into their junior year, I think about all this stuff that we're doing with open houses and parent-teacher conference alignment. I feel like we can then, once we have a common scope and sequence, we can then better strategize our partnership and communication with families. But right now, it's very individual, school-based. And that's just kind of where we're at, but we're committed to working together, across the student services and teaching and learning to make that happen, so.
Anybody else? Mr. Zenobia?
Well, thank you for the presentation. In looking at this and trying to understand, how do you tackle a problem this immense, it seems, and always growing. What I hear is trying to be done is, for me, it's identifying, obviously, what's going on, not only as teachers, but to have peers be able to do that. The sense I get is, how do you do that, and then what resources are available, which I know we have some in place now, but for what you're looking to review, I'm sure you're familiar with these, but the recommendation is going to be, okay, here's what's at our disposal, this is what we think. We'll bring that back as some type of proposal. I guess part of what I would want to hear or see would be, how is this integrated with all the other things that is expected of you in a day talking about behaviors on social media, talking about drug abuse, and obviously family situations and all of those things. How are those, being gathered up and understood at a grand scale, and how do you build something out for each? And I know you're probably all doing that now and understanding that at all those levels. But for here, looking at this and trying, I know we've tried to get some other resources in the past to identify what's going on, and that's probably very hard to do. But it's also very important. It's very important that we try to do it better. So I guess trying to understand what that looks like would be very helpful, because there's a lot out there, but also you could spend a lot of time on things that aren't very effective as well. So.
I think our hope too is when we do find the curricular resource that, meets some of our needs here with the look fors, is that we don't expect it to be the end all, right? That our team will then work to probably enhance that with maybe some other resources that they have and really write lessons that they can consistently apply across all schools and across the years.
I think also as mental health is a continuum, a student that might be learning about this in October might find themselves or a friend in crisis in March. The importance of having opportunities for us to continually demonstrate support. You mentioned other programs that we use, like we do have social emotional resources, we do have career and academic planning resources, we do have Navigate 360. There's a lot of different things that also have touch points throughout the year. So we're hoping that we don't have a one and done, but a continuum of conversation and opportunity and door opening consistently with our students.
And I think it's extremely important, as we are delving into all this, that after talking with other districts, some have textbooks that are 20 years old, but it checks it off the list. That's not what we want it to be. We know we have a state statute, and we know we have things that we have to do due to the state statute, but we want it to be a positive, all-encompassing experience that's helpful to the children, not something where, we're doing it, and here's this sheet of paper that we put together, and we can say it checks off a box. We really want to find the resources that are out there that we can utilize. And then, as Laura said, enhance those with some of the things that might be more specific to our community. Just because it's there doesn't mean it has to be there just as it is on the piece of paper that it comes with. We want to sit and we want to take a look at things and really build those, possibly picking and choosing some other things and putting them together, but what it is that we end up with, it needs to be the same across our district. We don't want any more of this self-curating or nobody wants to touch it. We need to have it and have it done well.
One of the other, behind the scenes, the team has done a lot of looking into what other state statutes like this are out there that impact the school day. So the one that comes to my head, and Dee, help me out with this, is the shaken baby statute that we have to do. And I think we cover it in science.
We cover it in a foods class.
Thank you.
With nutrition and other things.
So this is part of the work moving forward. It's really an opportunity, and why we wanted to come here tonight as part of a curriculum conversation to say, instead of just adding it in somewhere, we want to look holistically at this statute, but it might have some trickle-down effect of some of those other one-off statutes, like the shaken baby that's taught in foods class.
Is that like food, family, and you?
Food, family, and you. So there's attention to family structure, family relationships, things like that, but it's,
And maybe it
Yeah.
stays there. I'm not saying it shouldn't, but there's several of those one-off pieces that have just kind of left us wondering as we now look at more structured approach across our system beyond just math and literacy.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate your comments that right, we're not just doing this to check the box because the state says we need to check the box. We want to actually make it meaningful to students and to teachers and provide them with tools that are not just helpful, but in some cases necessary for them, to just be able to cope and deal with some of the challenges that they deal with. I think something that young people, especially today, struggle with in terms of the decision making is social media has amplified a lot of these problems, and I think that's a root cause of a lot of the problems that we're seeing, where so many students, because they are less social, because they are becoming more alienated and isolated, and they've begun just reducing their self-worth to their social media avatar. When something happens on TikTok or on Instagram or any of these apps, it causes them to spiral because they view that they can't separate their online personality and their online profile with who they are as a person in the real world. And so that might be something worth considering when we talk about the curriculum and talk about the decision-making process, is just kind of a mental health component to digital citizenship almost, where we're talking about, how to handle cyberbullying and how to handle some of these challenges where you're seeing these things online. I really think that that's something that a lot of our students struggle with and a lot of young people struggle with. Obviously, the point of the state statute and the point of this curriculum is to help students identify and understand how to make these decisions and how to help other people who come forward to them. Can you just kind of walk me through what the process is for teachers and how we train them on being able to identify some of these things and what the procedure is for that? Because it's not part of our mandated reporting, where if you see a student, at least in state statute, it's not part of mandated reporting for suicidal ideation and things like that. But what do we do when we identify a kid and they clearly need help? What's the process? What's the follow-up?
I don't know, Mr. Pat can probably speak to this a little bit, but it is part of our annual student services do presentations to our staff, and they do have look-fors and signs, and they do have what are the steps, who you call, there's a flow chart of who you call and go to. So it is part of their annual, I don't want to say training, but professional development at the beginning of the year. And Mr. Pat, I don't know if you want to add anything?
Yeah, just confirm that's what happens. Our school social workers or student services, personnel, school counselors train us in mandatory reporting, as well as refresher in signs of suicide, signs of mental health concerns, and as mandatory reporters, right, making sure you say something. And then from there, it really depends on the situation where things can go. And you want to involve the parents as quickly as possible, and then move through the process. If there's a reason where the parents could be a cause of that, possibly from the student, you work through that to the best of your ability and find resources. And obviously the parents are where we always want to go with. So not a specific step-by-step, but the initial recognition then puts it in the queue for anything and everything to support the student.
Yeah, obviously when it comes to something like a mental health crisis, there's no template for how to handle it. It's so personal and very time sensitive to handle that, but I appreciate that the first step is getting the parents involved as soon as possible. And tricky situations, but I appreciate the work that all of our staff do to help navigate them.
And Mr. Pat, if I'm correct, there is also that state requirement that any school that issues an ID has to have a resource number for mental health suicide prevention on it. So that's just another layer to it, but once we have this all figured out, we are going to not just hand this to the teachers who are going to be doing that, though we are going to be providing them, guidance and helping them get prepared to teach that. And I think that's why it's really important that we are partnering with student services for this, because it's a very heavy topic. And just the ability for us, or not the ability, but the plan of the pre, during, and post communication with parents is extremely important, which also needs to be paired with student services, so we get all that, what needs to be put out there. And hopefully this isn't something that is just beneficial for the students, but that also, we have adults, parents who are struggling. My daughter's former soccer coach committed suicide a couple months ago. So it's not just a kid thing, like we all know. And if we do our due diligence in going through the materials and then putting together our units of instruction, and we do the pre, during, and post communication with parents, hopefully this can also have a positive impact on some of the adults in our community as well, just because of the added communication from school to parents.
Mrs. Koenig?
Thank you for this presentation. Just a quick question, so we're looking at, if this were to be taught and implemented, it would be either like in high school in the health class?
Correct.
Middle school, I think you said you're looking at like gym class or that situation?
Right now, the plan would be for the physical education. Our middle school physical education teachers that we have currently are also licensed as 910 health. So it would be kind of a good fit, but
I think one of the other rationales, in addition to being certified as health educators, is that these teachers often work with students over 3 consecutive years. So they have enduring relationships with kids, which we feel is really important in this endeavor, not only in this area, but in talking about AODA issues and other health-related issues. So we're looking to really maximize their professional capacity and licensure to be able to guarantee these experiences for students.
Is it currently within the curriculum that they teach, are there any sections with regard to mental health, suicide? Or is this a topic that already they approach at some
in
point?
physical education?
In health, like.
Or-
Okay. For,
The middle school does not have a health class.
Right.
Which is one of the challenges that we have here. We do have health lessons, some of which are delivered through the physical education class, think things like CPR and things like that. But what we're looking to do is to take some of the health lessons that are currently being conducted in core content areas like ELA and math and science and move those into a health education setting. One, on the first part, to maximize instruction in core areas, but also to maximize the preparation that our physical education teachers have as health teachers and the longevity of relationship that they have with students. So we're working on what that could look like moving into the future.
so if there's a teacher, like, a health, FIA teacher in the middle school, if they, for whatever reason, maybe had a discomfort with approaching, having to teach this content, for whatever reason, personal, whatever it is, would there be anyone that would be able to assist, to step in?
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, what?
No, I was going to answer you, but I didn't think, I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. One of the options that are that would be available within the building is, in essence, swapping out. So your class would come maybe to me for those health lessons, and then you would take my class for whatever physical activity that they would be doing. So you do have that ability at the schools because of the multiple teachers, that if there was an issue with a teacher taking on that due to whatever reason, you would be able to switch that out with the other FIA teacher in the building, or if there was a real major need, then as a coordinator, I could always arrange things to come in for that teacher.
That's good that that's in place, because there are definitely situations where someone would be very uncomfortable teaching that, and I would hate to have to expect or mandate in some way that someone would have to cover something that they were very uncomfortable covering, so it's good to know that that flexibility is there. Thank you.
Can I just clarify, with Food, Family, and You, which is a consumer science course, right, middle school, that's required?
It's required because of the shaken baby requirement. If the lessons around shaken baby were not in that course could be more of an elective course rather than a required course.
That's interesting. Is that something that you'll be contemplating as part of this?
Yes, we're looking at all of our options.
Okay. Because the content of it is a lot like a health class. There's nutrition, there's self-care. So I was just kind of reacting to I think your comment that we don't have a health class in middle school, but that's probably pretty close to one.
It could be considered that. Some students might also perceive it to be a class where they're doing a fair amount of cooking and baking, and measuring and collaboration. So I think it just depends on the objectives.
Just interesting that it is required, but that explains why then, because
Yeah.
we wouldn't require a cooking class.
Yes.
Probably, maybe we should. Different conversation. So I think what would be helpful when you come back after you've looked at whatever resources would be, I know when we did the Navigate 360 stuff with student services, we looked at that whole landscape of what are all the different pieces we have. So I think there's a benefit to having a variety of tools in the toolbox, but then there could be some oversaturation of tools if we've got too many things that we're trying, and maybe there's something out there that could satisfy and have a little bit more continuity to it. So it would help if maybe we could go back to what we did with student services and just have the whole landscape, because there's a lot of overlap with things that.
I can see probably, this overlaps with some of the digital citizenship pieces, with academic career planning, some of this stuff. So it's a lot, and so we might be able to streamline the resources. That's where one of the resources to potentially look at is Navigate 360 that we're already using in some way. Again, not one thing is going to help every statute and everything we're looking for, but taking a comprehensive look and taking the time between both departments is needed. And that's our plan, really.
So I just wanted to elaborate on the comment around education in our core classes. For right now, for drug prevention, we partner with Elevate, and then that gives us kind of a basis for our peers at the high school. And Too Goods for Drugs is the curriculum that is being brought from the outside in during these classes. We're obviously looking to make that the best and cleanest possible, which is part of this journey. And as we look at mental health and suicide prevention, really to emulate that, the importance of it at the lower grade levels, and then see where that goes at the high school level. One thing I can say is, as a high school principal with an individual who self-curated health curriculum but taught it all day long and at a very high level, the trust that was built with that educator, not only from students to that person, along with student to student, was astounding. And it's hard to measure, but what I can say is so many students reach out to that individual teacher in regards to anything that was before we had Speak Up, Speak Out, and during, but still, it's very important that it's taken seriously with a really good curriculum, and the results are the trust being built for students to feel much safer to talk about it, as was relayed when that stigma is taken away from it, and taught very well to make that happen. So.
And that's an excellent point, that just delivering curriculum versus really kind of being that trusted and respected adult and conveying, vital information that trust is built. I think that can't be understated. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes our business for tonight. Are there any recommendations for future topics? Okay, seeing none. Just as a reminder, our April meeting is actually shifted to Thursday, so we will meet here again as a committee on Thursday, April 3rd. And of course, next week again with the full board. So that adjourns our meeting for tonight. Thank you.